Hello friends, welcome to your own channel on artificial intelligence and machine learning. In this video series, you are learning SQL programming. In the last video, we just touched upon our first DDL statement, create table. We learned the various data types and I explained the importance of various data types. So let's continue to build our courses and courses table for the education institute, and as part of that we just created our first table, students. We are trying to create this entire physical data model where we have the courses, students, trainers, batches, and the mapper tables. Okay, and what we covered so far is the first table, courses. First table, students. We also executed a insert statement. Insert statement is part of data manipulation language. We also executed select star. Select is part of data manipulation. The focus of this session would be more on create table. As we create table, it's also important that we insert some dummy data so we can later on fire queries on these tables and practice data manipulation languages. Okay, these syntaxes here, this is a syntax to insert one record. Once again, the shortcut, as you know, in MySQL workbench, the shortcut to execute a query is shift control enter. I go ahead, execute it. This syntax, if you have to insert more than one record, you just keep putting all the values. Each row is in one round brackets. So here begin and end. This is completely one record. This is a second record and so forth. And here null. For the fourth field, which is date of birth, I don't want to specify the date. So I can put null and it will be inserted properly because the date of birth has a accepts null. It does not have a not null constraint. Okay, we already inserted two records. So I'll go ahead and insert all of this in one go, shift control enter. And here at the bottom, I'm not sure whether it's visible to you on the screen, but at the bottom it says 9 rows affected, which means 9 rows got inserted. Duplicates are 0. If I run this query once again, the data will get inserted once again. The reason is data got inserted again is we don't have any constraint to say duplicate information. This identifier which we gave to a student, Anjali, cannot be duplicated. We did not put any constraint. As such, data can get duplicated. If you now run this select star, it will return 20 observations and some of the records 103, 104. If you scroll, you will have these records coming up again. And we don't want this. When we are actually designing for a business purpose, we don't want same student information coming 2 times. Somewhere we need to put a constraint, and that constraint can be a unique key constraint or a primary key constraint. What we need to do, we need to delete this table. Delete the table means drop the table. When we say delete, delete means removing the records, but here I need to drop the entire table. It is not necessary you need to drop the table. You can delete the content and then make necessary changes, but I'll drop it. And what I'll do is I'll introduce a primary key constraint. Primary key. Okay, what is primary key? If you say a particular column is a primary key, What it means is this column can have only unique value. No value in this column can repeat. You would have seen that for other columns I am putting not null, not null, null, not null. If you declare a column to be primary key, in this case the student ID, if you declare a column to be a primary key, automatically the not null constraint is applied. You don't have to explicitly write. Even this syntax is okay, where you explicitly say this column is an integer column type with a not null and a primary key constraint. You don't have to, because a primary key cannot have null values. So now I have dropped the table. I'll recreate the table and make student ID as a primary key. I execute it. Let me insert these records. All of these insert. I can delete this select. All of these insert. I'll go ahead, execute in one go. The last query 9 rows, before that 1 row. So 11 records inserted. And once again, I will insert this. This time the query has failed. You can see the red cross. The message is duplicate entry 103 for student primary key, constraint violated. So primary key means the column can have only unique values. No duplicate value can get into that. So we learned the first important constraint. Null, not null, we have understood, which are very basic. But the first most important constraint that we have understood is primary key constraint. Okay. Typically, you should put a primary key constraint on the column which is the identifier column for that record, by which you can identify easily. ID is the most common column which we use as a primary key. Okay. Here I have given you syntaxes, many syntaxes to insert. I would request you to write one insert query as a practice. Write one insert query to add a record in the students table. Pause the video and complete the exercise if you're watching it on YouTube. Okay, another practice exercise. Now this practice exercise, you have to, let me have this entire thing coming on one screen. Yeah, all of this is there. In this practice exercise, you have to create a table courses. Now when you create the table courses, the columns are given, the data types are mentioned, the constraints are mentioned. Description is just given for you to understand what each column is. Okay, so go ahead, create a table courses with these columns, data types and constraint. Pause the video so you have this entire thing visible to you in one screen, and write the create table syntax. Okay, let me show you the syntax. Drop table if exist. Basically, if the courses table exists. No, it does not, so I'll not run that. Here is a create table courses query. Course ID, integer primary key, name, varchar, description. Now here description is coming in blue. It indicates that it might be some keyword. That's why it is coming in blue. So probably if that is the case, you may choose to DESC for descending. So you may choose to make it slightly different. So you may probably say description. You may choose to make the column name slightly different, but here I'll go ahead and continue with description. It seems it is a keyword, right? That's why it's highlighted in blue. Creation date, date time, duration, integer, what is the course duration, fees, it will be money and it may have decimals, flag live, whether the course is live or it has been closed, something 10, so tiny int. So this is the syntax. I go ahead, execute, shift control enter is a shortcut. If you see, I don't typically use this. You may choose to use this. If I run the syntax once again by clicking here, it will say the table already exists. Okay, great. Now, if I want to change the column, as you know, create, alter, drop, these are the three data definition language. I want to change the structure of this column, and what I want is this create has a date time column. I can use date time or I can use timestamp. Okay, timestamp is used when you follow UTC convention. Okay, so it's okay. For now, we are not going to get into what is UTC and all of that. It is also storing information which is date and time. Okay, I want to modify the modification. Most important modification is not the timestamp. The most important modification here that I want to have is that it should by default, if I don't provide information for this column, then by default it should take the current timestamp. What is the current date time? Okay, it should take that. So here is what the default parameter is coming up. Now this default I could have, while writing the syntax itself, I could have put this constraint, not a constraint, this default value in the syntax like this also. Create table, and for specifically for date, I'm saying it should have a date time, and if information is not supplied, by default it should have the current timestamp information populated. Okay, now why is null and not null? If you're saying by default it will have the current timestamp, then it should never have null. No, if I specifically write an insert query for this table and I specifically mention null to be inserted in creation date, then null will get stored. But if I don't specify any information for this column at all, in that case, by default, the current timestamp will get populated. Now we created this column and later on we realized that, hey, we should have default date time getting into this, and for that default we need to modify. Currently we don't have any record in this table, so I could have gone ahead and run drop, and then I could have put here default. But what if you have in this table thousands of records? In that case you cannot drop the table, because if you drop the table, all data in the table will get lost. In that scenario, we will have to modify the table, and we can do that modification provided the existing values in that column are in line with the constraints which you are putting here and the data type that you are putting here. Okay, if the existing values comply with the constraints and the data type, then you can modify. If the existing values in a table does not fit into the data type that you are going to mention or the constraint that you are going to apply, in that case this syntax will fail. For now there's no records. So this will successfully execute. Control enter, shift control enter, executed. 0 rows affected. There is no rows. So we learned default. Another thing, I want to put a constraint that the fees, I don't want negative values to be put in fees column. So I want to put a constraint that any value which is put in the fees has to be 0 or greater than 0. So we can add a check constraint. So here what we are saying is alter table courses, add a check constraint on the fees column, and it has to be greater than 0. The same query could have been executed something like this. I could have put it here while creating the table, but probably if I missed putting any of these constraints, I can modify the structure later on also using alter table syntax. So here what we are doing is we are making changes to the courses table and adding a check constraint. Okay, both the syntaxes alter, modify, executed. So what we learned the following things as part of this session. We learned how to create a table as a practice exercise. You learned creating it, and we learned how to modify the table using alter table. Also note, when you are writing these syntaxes are more English like. Alter table, which table you want to alter. Modify, what column, which column, the column name, then the data type, the constraint. If you want to put any default, put a default. You want to put a check constraint, alter table, table name, add a check constraint. On which column you want to apply the check constraint, specify the column and what constraint you want to apply. Yeah. What you have to understand while writing these syntaxes is not the syntax. Please don't try to mug up the syntax. Please try to understand the concepts by which you can design things properly. Try to understand that, okay, hey, there is a business requirement. In a given field, the value should always exist. I can apply null, not null. A given field has to have only unique values. The value cannot be duplicate. I can apply primary key constraint, or I can apply a unique key constraint. We will see unique key constraint later on. In a given field, if the value is not provided, default, some value should go. What is the default? In a given field, the information that has to go has to be in a given range, or above a certain threshold value or below a certain value. I can put a check constraint. Various types of constraints can be applied, and that's what is important. If you don't remember how to modify a column, go ahead, go on Google and say, I want to modify existing column in MySQL. Google will throw lots of web pages which will teach you, which will give you the syntax. Concept cannot be learned. Concept cannot be searched like that. You need to first understand what concept you want to search, read it, imbibe it. Okay, focus more on the concepts. When I said concept cannot be learned, that was my mistake statement. Concepts have to be learned. Okay, syntaxes you don't need to mug up. Syntaxes you don't need to learn by heart. Any given point of time, You don't remember the syntax, Google search, find the syntax, execute it. Here is a syntax to insert one record. Currently there is 0 record. Let's go ahead, insert one record. And in this insert syntax, what is the difference compared to the previous insert syntax? In the previous insert syntax, we said insert into table values and we gave the values. In this insert syntax, the difference is we are saying insert into table and I'm listing all the column names, course ID, course name, description, duration, fees, flag live, but I did not specify creation date column. Then I'm giving values. 1001 will go for course ID. Excel A to Z is the course name. It will go for course name column. Everything about MS Excel in detail will be the description. Duration will be 3 days probably. Fees will be 6,000 rupees probably. Flag live 0. But when I created this course, I have not detailed it. I have not given the value for it. I run this insert, shift control enter, and I say select star from courses. The current date time stamp, if I go here you can see at the right bottom of my machine the date time stamp it has taken and inserted here. Let's make one more insert, and this time I'm inserting the values. I'm giving the value for all of the fields. This time I am giving the creation date also, but I am inserting a negative value for the fees. And if I go ahead, run this query, check constraint is violated, and the query did not execute. So you can see how these constraints can be powerful, and it prevents wrong value from entering into our table. There are more alter syntaxes. You want to add a column which did not exist. I want to add a column level. It does not exist. So I'll say alter table courses, add column name, data type, null, not null. Now please understand, if I say not null and I don't give default and I try to run this syntax, the table already has one record and I'm trying to insert, I'm trying to modify the structure of the table. I'm trying to add a column and I'm saying that column has to be not null. It executed, but it should not. Let me check the data. I'm surprised. By default, it took 0. I'm surprised it took a default value 0 because it should give error. If you're trying to add a column and data already exists, it does not take a default value, but it has taken, probably it may be a feature of MySQL. Other databases would not allow this column to be inserted. They would say you are trying to insert a column with a not null and there's no default value. You will have to explicitly say default. So in MySQL it has executed. Great. But please note, the right way of writing this syntax would be by giving a default value. Okay, we have added a column. I gave a column underscore level underscore. The column name was not right. I don't like the column name. Okay, rename it, make it more appropriate. Naming convention. You should follow naming convention which is self-explanatory. The column name should be given such that they are self-explanatory, and you should follow a convention which is typically a snake case. What is a snake case? For example, here we created a column course ID and I put a underscore course underscore ID. This is a snake case convention, or you can also call it underscore convention, underscore case convention. Okay, where we are separating the two words by underscore. The other convention is like this. This is called camel case. In a camel case, what you do is you make the first character of the next word capital. I prefer snake case. Here I gave the column name underscore level underscore. I don't like it. It's not self-explanatory. I'll rename the column and make it levels. Alter table, table name, rename column. Which column to rename with a new name? The column has got renamed, as you can see in the select output. I added the column only to explain that you can add a column, you can rename a column. I actually don't require this columns levels. So what I'm going to do is alter table, drop column levels. And here, when I run this syntax, the drop column will drop the column. And if we now see the output, the levels column is not there. So great. What we learned? We have learned so far what we have learned in this part of the video, we started from here. We created the table, primary constraint we learned. Then we went into a practice exercise, created a courses column, and new things that we learned are how we can give default value, how we can put check constraint, how we can alter the table, how we can add column, how we can rename a column, how we can drop a column. So good amount of DDL statements we have learned in this part of the session. There are still many things to be learned as part of DDL statements. For now, we will end the session here. In the upcoming session, we will see how we can give auto increments, how we can give foreign key, relation between two tables. There's more things to be learned. Till then, bye bye. See you in the upcoming session. Thank you.